Have you ever done something that felt so out of character, so unthinkable, that even when you replay it in your mind, you barely recognize yourself in the memory? That's where I find myself now. I never set out to cross that line. In fact, I always thought of myself as loyal, steady, and unshakably grounded. But temptation doesn't come announced. It slips in quietly, often in the form of someone you never expected. For me, it came in the shape of my best friend's son. A young man I'd known since he was barely tall enough to reach the kitchen counter. Now I can't shake the weight of what happened. The silence between us is heavier than any words. And the truth? It changed me forever. My name is Claire, and for as long as I can remember, my best friend, Emily, has been more like a sister to me. We grew up together, shared clothes in high school, and leaned on each other through heartbreaks, marriages, and motherhood. Our bond wasn't the kind that faded with time. It only deepened. Emily had her son, Daniel, when we were both in our late 20s. I was there at the hospital when he was born, snapping photos, crying happy tears, and promising I'd be the kind of aunt he could always count on. I kept that promise. Birthdays, graduations, late-night emergency babysitting, I was there. By the time Daniel turned 21, he wasn't the little boy I remembered. He'd grown into a tall, broad-shouldered man with a quiet intensity in his eyes. He carried himself with a kind of maturity that sometimes caught me off guard, though I brushed it off as me just being nostalgic. At home, my own marriage to David had been unraveling slowly, almost invisibly. From the outside, we looked fine. Family vacations, dinner parties, polite smiles. But behind closed doors, the air between us had gone stale. Conversations turned into logistics about bills or the kids' schedules. Intimacy had vanished years earlier, and though neither of us said it out loud, we both knew we were living more as roommates than as partners. It was in that silent, aching void that Daniel reappeared in my life. Not as the boy I once read bedtime stories to, but as a man with his own struggles, dreams, and secrets. It started innocently enough. Emily had asked me to help Daniel look over his graduate school essays. "You were always the writer," she said, handing me a folder of his drafts. That was the first time we really sat across from each other as adults. Coffee mugs between us, words flowing back and forth like a current. There was something startling about how easy it was to talk to him. He listened, not half-heartedly, not with distracted nods like David often did, but with real focus, like my words mattered. It had been years since I felt that way with anyone. At first, I thought it was harmless, just conversations, just helping. But a seed had been planted, and I didn't recognize it until it had already taken root. The nights I spent editing his essays stretched into evenings filled with conversation. We talked about everything. His frustrations with feeling overshadowed by his mother's expectations, my regrets about choices I'd made in my marriage, even trivial things like favorite films or music. One night, after he left, I found myself standing by the window, replaying our conversation in my head. I realized I was smiling. That smile faded quickly when I caught myself. What was I doing? This was Daniel, Emily's son. The guilt gnawed at me, but the pull only grew stronger. The turning point came on a rainy Saturday evening. Emily had gone out of town, and Daniel dropped by to return some books I'd lent him. The storm outside made the whole house feel like it was folded in on itself. Quiet, except for the drumming of rain against the roof. We sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp casting warm shadows. He told me about a fight he'd had with his girlfriend. His voice cracked slightly when he admitted, "Sometimes I just feel like no one really sees me." I looked at him, really looked, and the weight of his words hit something raw in me. Because I knew that feeling. I'd lived it for years. Without thinking, I placed my hand over his. Just a small gesture of comfort, but the moment stretched. His fingers curled around mine, tentative, like he was afraid I'd pull away. "I didn't, Claire," he whispered, almost like a warning. "I know," I said, my voice low, though I wasn't even sure what I was acknowledging. The silence between us said everything we were too afraid to speak aloud. The rain outside blurred the world, making the moment feel suspended, untouchable. When he leaned in slightly, I felt my breath catch. Every part of me screamed to stop, to pull away, to remember who he was. But another part, a quieter, hungrier part, didn't move. The kiss was brief, almost hesitant, but it cracked open something inside me that had been locked away for years. We pulled apart quickly. Both of us wide-eyed, guilty, terrified. "This can't happen," I said, my voice shaking. He nodded, his jaw tight. "I know." And yet, despite the words, the gravity between us only deepened. Over the next weeks, it was as though we were orbiting each other, caught in a pull we couldn't resist. Every glance lingered too long. Every conversation carried an undertone we didn't dare name. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, torn between the life I had built and the one my heart secretly ached for. The guilt was suffocating. I thought of Emily, of what this would mean if she ever found out. I thought of my husband, of my children. But I also thought of Daniel, of the way he made me feel alive again. The line had been crossed, and pretending otherwise felt impossible. The breaking point came one evening in late autumn. Daniel stopped by again, saying he needed someone to talk to. His relationship had officially ended, and he seemed heavier than usual, shadows under his eyes. We sat at the kitchen table, mugs of tea cooling between us. He looked at me with that same searching gaze, and I felt my defenses collapse. "I don't know why I keep coming here," he admitted. "It's dangerous. You know it. I know it. But I can't stay away." My chest tightened. "Daniel," I started, but my voice broke. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine again, firmer this time. "Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll walk away. I'll never bring it up again." The words hung in the air like a dare, daring me to choose. I should have said it. I should have protected us both. But the truth clawed its way out of me before I could stop it. "I do," I whispered. "I feel it too." The silence that followed was louder than any storm. My heart hammered as though confessing had broken something irreversible, and maybe it had. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't need to. The truth had already been spoken, and it bound us tighter than any touch could. But from that moment on, everything shifted. Every interaction, every glance, every word carried the weight of what we knew. We had stepped into a space where there was no turning back. The hardest part wasn't my guilt. It was the unexpected tenderness. Daniel wasn't reckless or careless. He carried the weight of what we were doing with as much fear and conflict as I did. That made it harder somehow. Because it wasn't just passion. It was connection. It was real, and it was wrong. The duality of it shredded me. I'd sit across from Emily during coffee dates, her laughter filling the cafe, and I'd wonder if she could see it on my face. If she knew. I'd lie next to David in bed, the distance between us like a canyon, and feel both the ache of betrayal and the impossible pull toward Daniel. The truth was undeniable. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. It's been months since that night of confession, and the secret still lives between us. We've kept our distance, knowing that one more step would push us into a place we could never return from. And yet, even in the silence, the connection lingers. I sometimes catch myself wondering, was it love? Or was it just the desperate grasp of two lonely souls finding solace in each other? Maybe both, maybe neither. I know what I risked. I know what it would mean if Emily ever found out, if David ever discovered the truth. The weight of that knowledge keeps me awake at night. But alongside the guilt, there's something else, something I can't deny. For the first time in years, I felt seen, alive, wanted. That doesn't erase the wrongness of it. If anything, it makes it harder, because it means this wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, and now I live with it. If you asked me whether I regret it, I don't know what I'd say. Regret and longing feel tangled, inseparable. All I know is that there's no turning back. The line was crossed, and it changed me in ways I'll carry forever. Sometimes I think about that night, about his eyes searching mine, about the silence that spoke louder than words, and I wonder if, years from now, I'll still feel the echo of it. Maybe that's the real punishment, not the risk of being found out, not the guilt, but the memory of a connection that can never fully exist, haunting me in the quiet moments. And so I keep the secret locked inside, confiding only here, in words, because speaking it aloud would destroy everything. But inside me, the truth whispers, I crossed a line, and there's no turning back.